to the age or the situation. A new situation is that people talking about a change in international order. So everyone understand that. Now the change in order means a redistribution of the power, mainly redistribution of the leading power. So you find that no matter China, no matter US, and no matter Kissinger, any politicians, when they're talking about the change of the world order, none of them talking about the global governance. Global governance is not the redistribution of power, but the responsibility. And Trump and clearly tell the world, now U.S. do not want to continue the responsibility for the world. That means U.S. do not want to undertake the leadership. Leadership, on the one hand, means you have the power. On the other hand, you have to undertake some responsibility. So for Trump administration, they concerned the responsibility too high, and the U.S. should not pay for that. Now, the things is changing so dramatically. First, the dominating ideology no longer that influential. Liberalism not only lost influence in some developing countries, liberalism faced the challenge domestically in US and in EU. The challenging or the peer ideology is anti-establishmentism. Anti-establishmentism in the United States is not opposing nationalism, is not opposing the communism, not against the socialism. Anti-establishmentism in the US and targeted liberalism. They against liberalist agents, so-called liberalist establishment. In Europe, the challenging or the competing ideology is populism. Populism is gaining momentum in Europe. Against what? Also against liberalism. Because during the post-Cold War period, liberalism became a dominating ideology based on the support from leading powers in Europe and United States. Today, these two leading powers no longer support liberalism. In this country, liberalism is no longer that absolute welcomed ideology. More and more people dislike liberalism. More and more critique about the liberalism. They said that the liberalism is wrong, right? So here I will say you find one thing is changing. The dominating ideology, liberalism, is no longer that influential, no longer that welcomed, like last 20 years during the post-Cold War period. Because Europeans and the Americans no longer advocating the liberalism as much as before. And then what? The government's behavior will be different from before. That means they no longer obey the liberalist norm as much as before. There's another academic difference. It's anti-globalism. Anti-globalization and the counter-globalization. What's the difference? Anti-globalization comes from the ordinary people who suffered from the globalization, because globalization makes the society polarized at both international level and domestic level. Internationally, you find the G20 accounts for 85% of the GDP of the world. How about the other 160 countries? They only share less than 25%. not very long, possibly just another 5 or 7 years, and the G20 will account for 90% of the GDP of the world, of the non-G20 countries. The over 160 countries only share less than 10% of the GDP. So the polarization will become worse and worse at a global level. Domestically, no matter Thailand, China, US, Japan, and Germany, every country's polarization becomes worse and worse. Okay, so that's why these low-class people in the grass, dislike globalization. They said globalization only benefits those people working for the international corporations. They said top 500. But how about us? How about the vendor industry? How about the people only own the small restaurants? They said we cannot. This is an early period. We call it anti-globalization. Nowadays, this situation a little bit changed. It's called counter-globalization. This is not from the people. It's from the government. Government starts saying, I do not like globalization. And the UK take the leadership. Now, wait a minute. I don't like to stay in the EU. We want to get out. We want to withdraw from it, so we have best. And then the US, Trump administration, globalization is a bad concept. It's not good. It's not in favor of Americans' interests. Americans first. We don't want to have the globalization. So American government no longer support the globalization. And so the US said, globalization means America have to undertake more and more international responsibility. UK, Germany, all the industrialized countries realize that if they participate in the globalization, what it means? It means they have to undertake more responsibility, but not more power. No one lacks responsibility. Everyone only lacks power. So Americans, let's quit. Quit where? Quit from the Paris agreements. We do not want to undertake the responsibility to reduce the CO2. And meanwhile say, hey, wait a minute. The responsibility for human rights is also a problem. High price. You say, okay, let's withdraw from the Human Rights Commission of the UN. And even education. America says, what is UNESCO? That's nonsense. Let's quit. What changed? The institution is changed. American withdraw from the institution talking about, hey, we want to establish new institutions. Temple said very clear to the world. Americans' foreign policy is to protect Americans' sovereignty. It's not to protect the world order. So I have here what he said. Temple, he said this on the January 22nd, just a few days ago. Actually, this is nothing new. He has said this several times. I just pick up the very new one. Truths like this, nations matter. No international body can stand up for a people as well as their own leaders can. Strong borders are a key to strong nations. This is how we keep our people safe and protect our sovereignty. Not only Pompeo, the State Secretary, and Pence, Vice President, and Trump, the President of the United States, all talking about how to protect Americans' sovereignty at UN Congress. So you see, Americans not only dislike the current international institutions, and Pompeo gave a very clear statement at the Marshall Foundation in Europe. He said that these institutions established by the United States, it worked well before, but now they are no longer suitable for Americans' interests. We need to establish new international institutions. So you see now the first element is the ideology. It's changing, but it is not clear what direction it is. Liberalism still the strongest one, and all of the other competing ideologies not as strong as liberalism, but they are undermining liberalism influence. Liberalism influence going down. Meanwhile, the major powers start concerned to establish new international institutions. So the second factor, institution is changing. Third, the third factor is norms. International norms. Most of the norms based on liberalist ideology. But when the European countries and the US no longer advocating liberalism, and then they said these norms have to change. That means reform the current international norms.